A quick Google Images search of castles or fortresses will yield a whole host of results. A number of pictures of high-walled structures, usually made out of stone, with very few and very small openings. Walls that have towers on either side and turrets along the top. Sometimes there's the remnants of a moat you can see around there. All of these pictures, though, most of them, I would say, show these high-walled structures kind of in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing around, just empty grassland and vacant hills. And almost every single one of these pictures of a castle or a fortress shows that castle or fortress in ruin. It's standing there, dilapidated, broken down, not much left, and certainly not occupied and not being used anymore. They simply remain as a reminder of a once great kingdom that had staked its claim to an important or productive or strategic location, but now no longer exists beyond the pages of a history book. Every once in a while, I come across a video, an infographic that shows in 4 minutes the history of all of the nations that have come and gone over the last 2,000 years. As you start the video, you see a map, and a color representing a particular nation appears on that map, and it starts to grow and spread across the map. Then after a while, a new color is introduced, and the first one starts to shrink while the second one grows and expands. And then that one starts to shrink while another color sort of takes over, and on it goes. Every nation being represented, the Roman Empire or the Ottoman Empire, the British Empire. No matter how great or how large those kingdoms and nations were, at some point they start to shrink, or at some point they go away altogether. Because that's the way it goes. However great or powerful a nation is, at some point it will lose its power and it will go away. No matter how strong or impenetrable a castle or fortress might be, at some point it just stands in ruin, broken down and dilapidated. We don't often think about it that way, and maybe that's because we don't get to witness the beginning and end of an empire. We're not around to see the entire lifespan of a kingdom or a nation. But it's true. That's the way it goes. It begins, it has its height of power, and then it ends. Every single nation has gone this way, either shrinking from its former glory or disappearing altogether. With one notable exception, of course. Because there is a kingdom that has existed for the entire existence of the world. It's been around since creation, and it still is around today. A nation so great and so powerful, not only is it not getting smaller, it's growing and increasing, and its power always remains. It is this kingdom to which we belong. And it is under the care of the ruler of this kingdom that we find ourselves. It is the safety and security of this kingdom that we get to enjoy, and we get to have as our own. The problem, though, this kingdom isn't always easy to see. It's not sitting right in front of us. And many times this kingdom is hidden beneath shameful and inglorious things of this world. And the king, who is ruler of that kingdom and therefore ruler over all of us, also is hidden beneath the shameful and inglorious things of this world. When Jesus was led out to be crucified, they hung a sign above his head on his cross that read, "The King of the Jews." Pontius Pilate required that sign be posted, and it was sort of Pilate's jab at the people who didn't recognize him as a king and didn't want Jesus to be their king, the people who wanted him crucified. It was Pilate's way of saying, look, this guy is your king, he's the king of the Jews, and now you're trying to have him killed, and you're responsible for his death. That's what Pilate wanted the people to know and understand. Pilate was under the understanding that he was the king of the Jews, but the people didn't see him that way. And so the sign that proclaimed him as a king, the people used that as a way to mock him. Look at this king. If you're a king, save yourself. If you're a king, come down from the cross. Set up your kingdom. The people saw Jesus no longer as a king. They saw him as somebody who was defeated completely and totally, somebody who was battered and bloodied, broken and beaten. When Jesus was on the cross, he did not fit the people's perception of what a king should be. And if Jesus were bringing a kingdom to restore the people, that kingdom did not fit their perception of what it should look like. Because the people were still under the control of the Romans. They still lived in poverty. They did not have wealth or prosperity. Jesus also came without pomp and circumstance. He was not accompanied by a great undefeatable army. He didn't come with rousing words that would incite the people to overthrow their earthly oppressors. He didn't come with any of that. In fact, all he had done was threaten to upend their way of worship and the religious ceremonies that they held dear. All this Jesus had done was threaten to undo what they thought was their way of salvation by their own works. Jesus made the people mad. Certainly they didn't want to recognize him as a king. And now he's hung there on the cross, defeated, and so they mocked him. They dismissed him, they despised him, they disregarded him. No longer would he be their king. And so they would go somewhere else to find a king. And they would go looking for some other kingdom to be a part of. One that gave them prosperity and wealth and happiness in the world in which they lived. Which is not so different from what the world says today when the world looks at Jesus. The people of the world see the way things are going and says, where's my king? How could Jesus be my king if this terrible stuff is happening still day after day? Jesus isn't my king. Jesus can't be my king because I'm still struggling. Every day is a struggle. I'm still living paycheck to paycheck. I still carry loads of debt. I'm still stuck in a dead-end job that I hate. Where's my king? I still see heartache in the world. I see friends becoming sick and ill, and I fear that I will become sick or injured in some way. I still see conflicts that end with all kinds of needless bloodshed. I still see the mass shootings on the news. I still see people hurt each other, and I'm even hurt by the people who claim that they love me. I still see these things happening. So why, if Jesus is my king, doesn't he put a stop to it? Jesus a king? I don't think so. And for that matter, Jesus is not going to be my king who gets me closer to God, because I can do that on my own too. I can grow closer to God by the way that I act, by the attitudes that I have, the things that I say, the charity that I contribute, the kindness that I show. Sure, Jesus is good to think about on the weekends once in a while, but he's just an inspiration for me. He's just a way to encourage me to have a better attitude and to think good thoughts and to do good things, because that's how I grow closer to God. Jesus, my king? I don't think so. And we'd be fooling ourselves if we said we never thought the way that the world thinks. How easily we become disappointed by the circumstances of this world and of our lives, to the point where we say, where's Jesus, my king? And so we look for a king that the world looks for. We look for a king who gives us nonstop happiness from beginning to end in this life. A king who gives us all the wealth and the riches that we want. A king who releases us from the oppression of not having what we want. A king who makes us feel good by taking away all the things that make us feel bad. That's the kind of king we want. So we're looking for a king who is only concerned about the temporary. A king who is temporary because he only serves me while I exist in this world. A king who is only concerned about taking away my trials and struggles and hardships. A king who is only interested in putting a fortress around me while I live in this world to keep the bad stuff away from me. So we want a king who doesn't last. A king who sets up a fortress that will become broken down and dilapidated. A king who puts our color on the map and causes it to increase, but only while we live here. That's the kind of king we want. And if we were to get what we want, what would happen? We would end up like those castles and fortresses that stand in ruin, dilapidated and broken down, and one day will go away forever. If we were to get what we wanted, we would be that color on the map that would expand for a time but then would disappear. If we were to get what we wanted, we would have safety and prosperity, but only for this life, and beyond this life, who knows? And so we realize we need a better king. Now, as Jesus hung there on the cross, it's difficult for us, for anyone, to see him as a king unless we view him through the eyes of faith. And while all the people around the cross ridiculed him and mocked him and said, "You're no king," there was one nearby who did see Jesus through the eyes of faith. The criminal who was hanging next to Jesus. Think about him. He was hanging there alongside Jesus in pain and agony. And he knew that his life was not going to get better from that point on. He knew that his life was being taken from him. He knew that he would never have comfort again. And he knew that the few moments of his life that he had left, those moments would be spent in agony. And yet, because he saw Jesus as a better king, he cried out to him and he prayed to him. Words that we're familiar with, words that we hear every Good Friday. He didn't ask Jesus to take him down from the cross and set up a kingdom and have him live the rest of his life in peace and safety. He was looking forward to a better kingdom. And he said, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." A kingdom that had nothing to do with temporary earthly things, but a better kingdom, ruled by a better king. Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom. That was his simple prayer, and it's ours too. Because it takes almost no time at all, through simple observation, to realize that God has not set up a kingdom here on earth. God did not send his Son into the world to make our lives easy and comfortable and carefree. Jesus did not come to remove every pain and every struggle and to give us nonstop happiness. Jesus didn't come to do that because he's not that small. And his goal, his purpose, is not that small. He came to give us something far better. He came to give us a kingdom that is better because it's a kingdom that will never stand in ruin, dilapidated and broken down. A kingdom that will never disappear from the map. A kingdom that remains forever, the heavenly kingdom that is ours even now. God sent his Son into the world to give us the kingdom that remains forever and never goes away. God sent his Son into the world to bring us there. And because this is the better kingdom that our better king brings, then he's going to do so in a way that's far different from all of the worldly kingdoms that express their dominance through a show of force and oppression of others. Jesus came into the world to give up his life. He came into the world to suffer and die. He came to suffer the agonies of hell, the agony of abandonment from God. He came to suffer that because that's the payment necessary to take away sin. And the only way that we can enter this heavenly kingdom is if we are free from sin, if we have no sin counted against us. And the only way that payment for sin could be made without us suffering eternal death in hell and condemnation is if Jesus suffers it for us. So So he went to the cross, and he was beaten and battered and bloodied and broken. He suffered God's wrath. He was despised. He was rejected. He was dismissed. And all of that gets us into God's kingdom. But he did more than that, because we shouldn't think of Jesus just as somebody who died, our king who gave up his life, because he is our king who took up his life again. Talk about a show of dominance, a show of force. He defeated the greatest enemies that we have, sin, death, and the devil. He did it by taking away the consequence for sin. He did it by rising from the dead to take death's power away. He stands victorious over death, and he stands victorious on our behalf. So when we see our risen Lord, we know beyond the shadow of a doubt that we too will rise. That even death cannot keep us out of God's kingdom, where we will live forever with him. That's the power that God displays. And it's power that lasts forever. It's power that can never be taken away. And isn't that better? Isn't that reassuring? I suppose you could say it would be nice if Jesus were to establish a kingdom on earth. Give us all that we ever wanted. Make our lives comfortable and easy and carefree. But when that doesn't happen, aren't we better off knowing that there is something better, a better kingdom waiting for us when all of the good things that we have in this life are taken away? When the life that we live comes to an end, we have an eternal kingdom that we get to go into. We have an eternal king who continues to fight for us, continues to bring us salvation so that we can go there through his power. This is the kingdom we look forward to. So no matter what happens in this life, no matter how bad things get, we can say it's going to get better. Maybe not while we are living in this world, but the moment we leave this world, the moment we enter that kingdom, it will be better. It will be perfect. That's the better kingdom that we have to look forward to. And it comes to us by God's grace. It comes to us because he sent us Jesus. Jesus, who is our better king. Amen. Please stand.